We got this slip going around for anybody that's interested in going down to Dr. Bob's house in Akron, Ohio. What we're doing, we're trying to get a general feeling how many people is interested. This is for Al-Anon and AA members. If you don't know what Dr. Bob's house is, ask your sponsor or somebody that knows something about AA. You know, AA, that's where it all began at in Akron, Ohio, right this place right here. And I heard a lot, and I've been there several times. You have a spiritual feeling when you go down there. So, and we're just trying to see how many people we're going to get, and then at our district meeting, we're going to talk about it. We may leave these flyers out for a little while, but as many people we can get going, 'cause, everybody's welcome. I'm saying so. All right, and we'll just leave this up there, or if you just sign it, put your telephone number down. What other? Any other announcements?
Is that going to be like a bus trip, or is it individual vehicles?
We're going to see. Well, we're probably going to see if we get some type of transportation through either a small van or whatever. How many people we got? We got 20 people. Then we'll take a small van. If we got 70 people, we'll take a big van. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Today's Joni's birthday. All right, and what else?
District meeting.
Richard.
On next Sunday, on December 3rd, we're gonna have a regular district meeting. That's at Jabez House in Salina at 1:15. It is 4 GSRs, alternate GSRs, and emergency service. Thank you.
And then next week on Friday, I got a lead coming down from New Carlisle, and we have a joint group conscience with Al-Anon. So if this is your home group, or if you're a member of Al-Anon, you're all welcome to attend. Anything else? All right. Well, that's a friend of mine, John L. from Greenville. I've known John probably the last 4 or 5 years, and I know he has a good story. I know he's been in the program for quite a few 24 hours. So without further ado, I give my friend John L. from Greenville, Ohio.
I'm John. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey,
John.
Hi, John. Hey, before we get started talking and stuff, this is my sponsor is going to have 50 years of sobriety on the 12th of December. He lives where I used to. I used to live in the South Dayton area, but he's still my sponsor, and he's still breathing, which is a miracle considering everything that's going on with him. So some of you have signed this, but if you haven't signed it, if you congratulate on him, there's no room left on the inside, but there's plenty left on the back. So do you have a pen there or something? Anybody have a pen?
Richard?
Got a pen? Okay. Pass this around, I appreciate it. Trying to give him something to acknowledge him all the time. Oh, so the purpose of this is for me to tell you what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And as much as I can, it's not going to be too much about me, and it's going to be more about the program itself and how that all works, how that worked in my behalf. The first part of what it was like, because I did grow up in Greenville, Ohio. I left though when I was 18, went to the Air Force, came back into college, and did all that stuff, and I worked in the Dayton area for 40 years. However, I only worked for a company in Dayton for just a few years. The rest of them were out of town. I had an office in my house, which was perfect for me. And one of the things I should mention too is my sobriety date is October 10th, 1980. And I got sober when I was 27 years old. And if you went to Greenville schools, I'll break that down for you. That means I'm 70 now. And I like being 70. I like being sober at 70. And the whole process began in that area. I grew up with two parents who grew up in the Great Depression, and they would be 104 and 100 right now if they were still living. And they had a certain ethic about how to live, and the ethic was based on conserving everything, keeping everything, saving your money, don't spend money for anything, for God's sakes. My kids aren't like that, by the way. They scare the hell out of me. But was not based on a healthy sort of thing. It was based on fear. If you grew up in that era and you're that age now, then a lot of what happens to you, a lot of how things worked for you is you lived a life based on fear, because my parents were the folks that didn't actually know whether they were going to have supper tonight or not. Or if they were going to have it, they didn't know what they were going to eat or how much they were going to get to eat. And there was one occasion when I was working in the office, an office in my house. My dad was over for a while, and he lived with us for a while when I was married, and he also lived close by thereafter for a few months before he passed away. And he was talking one day, and he said, I was having this problem in the business stuff I was working with, and it never did get resolved, but that's immaterial. It was important. It was really troubling me that day. And he came down and talked to me and said, "What's going on?" I told him. And he said, "Well, at least you know what you're going to eat today." And I went back upstairs. It was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I thought about that. This comes from somebody that lived through that did that. This isn't part of his imagination or something that he's conjuring up for me just for my benefit. He actually lived that way. So I quit that afternoon. Not quit the job, I quit working. And I went upstairs and I talked to him the rest of the day and asked him about how he grew up and what was going on. What'd you get for Christmas, Dad? Well, some years I got a pair of socks. And other years didn't get anything. And my uncle told me at one point he had a great Christmas one year when he turned 10 years of age. He got an orange and a pair of socks. So life was a lot different. When you grow up like that, you're afraid of running out. The important feature of that is they passed that on to their kids, not intentionally. They didn't mean to do it. They didn't get up one morning and say, "How can I mess up 3 kids today? Let's see, I'll teach them how to be afraid of everything." And so I grew up, that's how I grew up, fear and anxiety. I've had that all of my life. I'd like to report to you now that it's all gone. That's a lie. And speaking of being honest, Joni told me she's 25 today. I believe her because folks in AA do not lie. And that's how he grew up, and that's how I grew up too, around them. And so when it came to high school, I was a fairly smart guy, I suppose, average, something like that. And I read everything I could get my hands on. The problem was I wasn't reading anything that they assigned me to read. I read all of the stuff that I was interested in. So I graduated high school with like a 2.00 infinitesimally long thing, digit grade point average. Went away to the Air Force for 4 years, which is a great place to learn how to drink if you've not been there. And the big turning point in alcoholism for me came when I was assigned overseas to a different part of the world, different culture, the whole thing. And drinking ramped up enormously then when I was in the Japanese area. And at that point I went from what I thought was almost a social drinker to a genuine full-blown alcoholic. And really, once I came back from Okinawa, I was never really the same after that. Not because of the culture or anything, just because of the ramping up of the drinking and et cetera. And it changed a lot of things. So that gives you a pretty good idea of what it was like. And what happened is, I didn't go to college until I was 26 years old. I came back from the Air Force, worked for a while, went to college. Finished up there with a degree in engineering, and again, 2.0000. Never really got great grades. And I got two DUIs. Well, I have three DWI is what were called then. I got one when I was 19. Went to mayor's court. The mayor was a friend of my father's. I got fined $250, and it's not on any records anywhere. The second and third one were in Montgomery County, and they're not quite as understanding or lenient at that time, 40-some years ago. And I got 2 within about 9 months. And so I resolved I was going to stop drinking. And I made it for a few days. And then I went into the bar at Wright State University where I was going to school. and I ran into a guy I used to drink with. And instead of having a beer belly and broken veins in his face, the belly was gone and his face looked clear. It didn't look like himself at all. I said, "What did you do?" He said, "Well, I got some help from a private organization." I said, "What's the private organization?" He said, "Well, let me ask you some questions before I tell you what the private organization is. Are you willing to go to any lengths to get sober?" I said, yeah, I would be willing to go to any lengths. It's good, then you can go to an AA meeting with me tonight. How I got sober is strange to me, and I think what a paradox, what a touch of irony is, that I got sober by meeting a recovering alcoholic in a bar who was having a Coke, and I went in there to have a Coke, in quotation marks. But because he was having one, I actually did have a Coke that day. And I went to an AA meeting with him at the Ailey United Methodist Church on Kemper Road in Dayton, Ohio. And that was my first meeting in 1980. What I did for the next X number of years was work the program pretty superficially, looking back in respect to it. I went to meetings, did a cursory look at the steps, went through the steps as best I could. And then I put the steps up on the shelf. And they were on the shelf for quite a while. And then my hair would catch on fire, my butt would be on fire, whatever you want to light up. It wasn't going good. And I'd get the steps off the shelf, and I'd work the steps again, and I'd feel good, and I'd put them back up on the shelf and go forward again. So it was a cycle. I'd work the steps and get to a nice, calm sort of place, then gradually fall back down. Everything would go to hell again. I'd pick back up, did the steps. I did that for a very long period of time. And then there was no real stability involved in that at all. I got married when I had about 15 years in the program. We stayed married till I had 25 years in the program. We adopted 2 kids. And so I have two 25-year-old, they are actually 25, Johnny. They're 25-year-old kids right now, and 4 grandkids. When that all happened, that's where I was when I got married. I was that steps on the shelf, work them, feel better. I got married and I went from steps on the shelf to steps in a safe, I think, steps in storage. And so I didn't go to very many meetings. By the time we wound up getting near divorce, I was attending maybe a meeting a month, maybe 2 on a good month. And talking to my sponsor pretty infrequently, as in every several months. And it came to a really good point for me, because in that year I had an injury, and I was in the Air Force. I broke my neck when I was 19. And it never really healed quite right, but it healed as best possible, and it was too risky to go in and fix it after they figured out what was wrong, so they left it as it was. Well, it eventually degenerated, and I had to have a spinal surgery, and I've got a 5-inch long titanium plate in my neck. That was a result of that surgery. Well, I was hoping to go back to work, and they had other ideas, and they said, no, we don't want you to go back to work. And so we tossed back and forth, well, what do you want me to do? We talked all week, and finally on a Friday, I talked to them and said, I'm not going to sue you guys. Just tell me what the heck's going on. Why aren't you giving me my job back? You're giving me a lot of stuff to do that doesn't amount to anything. And they said, well, frankly, you've become a liability to us. You've got this injury, and if you go out into the field again and you get hurt, the liability is going to rest solely on us, and we don't want that, so we want you to go on long-term disability. The same guy that used to make fun of people who went on long-term disability. My wife had a co-worker of hers that went on disability, and she and her husband wound up buying a sailboat in Annapolis, Maryland, and they drive back and forth to there from Dayton to stay on their sailboat. And I said, well, they should name the sailboat disability. And I'd make fun of people who did that. And that was all a part of my pretty much non-existent AA program at that time. We went on from there, and that was on a Friday when I heard about that and had the usual weekend. My wife and I had lost the connection quite a while ago before we got divorced. We weren't really talking to each other than basically the business of living a day at a time, the business of taking care of your house and the kids. And so we were drifting apart. That connection was gone. And on Tuesday she asked me for a divorce. And that was on June 12th, says, can you be out by the first of the month, which I realized afterwards why I needed to be out by the first of the month, because her boyfriend moved in on the 5th of the next month. And I went through that, and that harkens to one basic point in the program. It's what I think I had, and I believe lots of people have, they've expressed it anyway. Come into the program, I'm not connected to anything. I'm just all by myself and drinking, and I'm living on the basis of fear and worry and trying to control everything so I don't have that. And that's what I was doing. So there was no connection with other people. Well, I got to that point again, but I was 25 years sober, and I wasn't connected to anybody. And so I was out in that next month, and I was sitting in this place that I'd rented. I wanted to be very close to my kids. I was only wasn't quite a mile away from the house where we shared in our marriage. And I was sitting there one Sunday afternoon, and the first weekend I did not have my kids around, so I didn't have much to do, and I was retired at that point, involuntarily. I didn't want to be retired. And I sat there and I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And as dumb as it sounds, with being sober 25 years, I thought, maybe I could go to an AA meeting. I hadn't been to one for a couple of months by that time. And I went back to AA, and I went to a 4 o'clock meeting, I went to a 7 o'clock meeting, and I went to an 8 o'clock meeting. And gradually, the same connection I had with just a few months of sobriety, I got back again. And I began to understand that what I was doing was the antithesis of practice. I was avoiding AA, and what I was doing was living again on the basis of self-centered desires. That would in itself explain why the job didn't work out and why the marriage didn't work out. So you can lose it. The face of sobriety takes many forms, but you can lose a lot in sobriety and still stay sober. And I lost a lot and still stayed sober. And the losses weren't somebody else's fault, they were my fault. I was the person, I was self-involved. I was the one who didn't pay attention. I was the one. And it says very clearly in the big book, and in my mind it settles the dispute for me. It says very clearly we're to look at where we are at fault. It doesn't say I'm to look at my part. And that speaks to me very clearly because there are two different things here. If I'm looking at my part in whatever relationship it is with person, place, or thing, I'm also still in the back of my mind considering your part. I have faults, but you have faults too. And as soon as I do that, which I had been doing that for quite a while in the marriage and et cetera, and in the general practice of life, as soon as I do that, the program doesn't work anymore. The program does not work if I consider my part, your part, at least not for me. I'm not talking about you all. Y'all do whatever you want. But it didn't work anymore. Resentments don't go away if I still keep the resentment of their part of the issue. And you can imagine I had a few resentments since I got divorced and the job went south and the job that I'd wanted for years too. I came back into the program, and basically at about 25, 26 years, I started again. And I began with the steps, and then it occurred to my brilliant, keen, intellectual, alcoholic mind, somebody, I think that's what Joe and Charlie call it. It occurred to me that if I never put down the steps, I don't have to pick them up again. If I never put them up on the shelf, I don't have to get them down again. So why don't I carry them with me? Why don't I live them instead? And it brings me to the steps now, which is if there's an important part of what I have to say, which is doubtful, but if there's an important part of what I have to say, it's about the steps. It started out with, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And the key couple of key words in that are we. That means everybody. I'm in a group of people that I'm connected to. And I'm connected to everybody in the same way that everybody else is connected to one another in the room. You know, this connection as soon as I walked in the room. I can feel it when I came in this evening. I could feel, these are, you know, I've been felt disconnected all day because of some stupid issues that occurred that I let bother me too much. But as soon as I came in the room, I felt connected to everybody. It's a great feeling. Well, that's the we part. The other part that's really important is powerless. Powerlessness is, after a long period of time that I've done the steps now, I realize powerlessness is really my right size. I'm not meant to have power over you or anybody else. That's not how it works. I can make suggestions, and that's as far as the train will go. And I don't need to go any farther than that. But I'm powerless over alcohol and drugs too, which I'm from the era, the old timers here may know it. You heard of a drug called a 714? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. About a third of the people heard of that. The rest of the people are going, what the hell is he talking about? 714 is a horse tranquilizer. My memory is they're about that big, but they weren't. They were about an inch long. So if you're taking horse tranquilizers, you're really into it. And I was taking those and drinking beer and scotch and vodka. And I like to drink a beer, a scotch, and a vodka. And then start again, a beer, a scotch, and a vodka. That's a crazy ass person. And so the powerlessness also relates to people, places, and things too. I don't have power over people. I don't have power over places. I don't have power over things. And when I try to have power over those, the same way as I try to have power over alcohol or drugs, everything becomes unmanageable right away. And if I'm upset with somebody and I'm trying to figure out how to get them, or how to get even, or how to square up everything, I'm already into unmanageability. And so the disease starts from the very beginning of the steps. And what to do about it starts from the very beginning of the steps for me too. And when I process it that way, I realize my whole life, the way I've done things is based on that same disease model. And the disease model is that I go take a drink of alcohol or take a drug, and that's not enough. I want another one, so I get another one. Well, that's not quite enough, so I get another one. There's a joke that only alcoholics get. The guy goes into a bar, and there's a sign right over the bar that says, all you can drink for $10. And the alcoholic sits down and says, I'll have 2 of those. Alcoholics laugh. I've told that joke to other people before that aren't alcoholics, and they go, what is he talking about? And I understand that. I guess the people who laughed understood that too. Everybody did. And so when I get involved in life, I get involved with that disease model running in my head. So what I need to do is be restored to sanity. And eventually being restored to sanity meant to me that I accepted I was powerless and that I'm not managing life. And if I accept that, then that becomes the right size that I talked about a second ago. Well, I still am absent a higher power. I need to turn my will and my life over to the care of a higher power. And care is different than turning it over directly to them. The care means that they're caring for me. And I believe that. I believe that there's a higher power that does care for me and care about me. Well, I've still got those character defects, and where do they come from? For me, they come from self-centered fear. And self-centered fear is based on the real simple idea that seems to everything traces back to, is I'm afraid I'm going to lose something I've got, or I'm afraid I'm not going to get something I want. And that goes back to and when I run through the inventory, it goes back to that thing I talked about at first, which is living on the basis of fear and anxiety. And that's how I grew up. Well, the basic thing of it is I'm afraid I'm not going to get what I want. And there's 2 different things. There are wants and needs. Since I've been alive, I've had all of my needs. Eaten every day. I've lived under a roof almost all the time. And just almost always had a car to drive, always had a little bit of money, never been rich, but had a little bit of money to get around and do things. So my needs have always been met. It was the fear of either being denied my wants or not getting what I want or something of that nature. And that goes back to the central idea of the disease model, that I had this belief, and I grew up with this like this, is if I get what I want, I'm going to be happy. That sounds pretty reasonable, sounds kind of logical, but it's bullshit. Because if I get what I want as an alcoholic, what I'm going to then want is more. So I live in a nice house. I still catch myself occasionally thinking, I want a bigger house. I live by myself. I don't need a bigger house. I don't need the size house I've got. I could live in I could live in half of this room and be just fine. But that's how my mind works. And I'll think, well, I want a new car. No, I don't want a new car. I want the one that costs an outrageous amount of money and has every option on it that you can possibly imagine. And I'll be happy with it for about 3 weeks, and then I'll want a bigger one or a better one. There's got to be one in Europe somewhere that costs more. And that's how the head works. That's how my head works. And that, if I look at that real carefully, that's the disease model. Give me a little bit of something and I want more. Give me that next thing and I want more of that, more of that, more of that. And finally you get to the point where all I'm doing is living on the basis of more. Whatever it is you have, I want more of it. And it doesn't matter what it is, I'll take more of that. Just like the alcoholic taking two $10 all-you-can-drink ordering that anyway. So that comes down to the making a list of the exact nature of the wrongs. That's in step 8. And provided also did step 6 and 7 and get those removed. And the important thing, it does say in the big book that those defects are removed. I read that book really carefully and several times. It doesn't say how long they're going to be removed for. It doesn't say these are going to be removed forever. In my case, they might be removed for 5 minutes. But that's a good thing because now I can do it again in 5 minutes. Sounds like a lot of work. It is. But the alternative is that I don't do that and I get all that stuff back again that I don't want to live with and shouldn't be living with. No one should. And so if I'm going to do something about the disease that I have that's related to character defects too, I've got to do something like that. So I really have looked at it, the most important 5 minutes of my life are the next 5 minutes. What I decide in the next 5 minutes can affect the rest of my life. If I decide I'm not going to work the program and I'm going to live on the basis of self, I live in Greenville, you know the place is not that big. I can be in a bar in 5 minutes. I know of one bar that's open right now, probably, I suppose it is. Yeah, it's Friday, I was thinking of Sunday. But I know of one bar that's open right now, and in 5 minutes I can be there. I'll probably leave here and in 5 minutes be in a bar in Coldwater. You all in Mercer County are kind of known for. I'm sure there's a bar in Coldwater, at least one. You know that the number one consumption per capita in the state of Ohio for alcohol is Mercer County. Stark County's number 3. So we're right there with you.
There's 2. What's 2? Auglaize?
That's it. I think it is Auglaize County. It's one of the counties east of here somewhere. I don't remember exact, but I think it might be Auglaize. There's another, I can't think of the other county that might be in that area. So we know how to do it. And in this room, we really know how to do it. And that gets to the exact nature of the wrongs. The exact nature of the wrongs is that fear again I'm talking about. Well, that causes a lot of problems with and for other people. You know, I went through the marriage as a self-centered individual. I hurt a lot of people. Hurt my spouse, obviously, hurt my wife. But also hurt the kids because I was thinking about me instead of them. And what happily happened, I retired, went back through the steps, and, started living the steps again, and then began spending all summer with my kids. Stayed with me all summer. And then they stayed with me 4 days one week and 3 days the next week. And it was some of the best stuff that I ever experienced. And they both came out okay. I have a daughter that Gary's met that's in the fellowship now. She'll have a year on January 3rd. And went through her trials and times with that. And she knew how to get here because I went here with them when they were kids. My son is I tell people that people say he follows a different drummer. And I said, well, that's not quite right. He's actually in a different band. And he is. He's got an entirely different way of looking at things. I'm an engineer by training and all that stuff, and so everything's in little squares the way my head works. He's an artist. So he doesn't do things like I do at all. And, when he mows the yard, he'll mow a patch, then he'll move over and leave grass and mow the next one, and then come back and do this with the mower so that there's a straight line and a line that looks like this. Because he thinks that looks cool. And actually it does. I just never, in my wildest dreams, ever thought about doing something like that. But he does. And he's a great individual for me to be around because he's 180 degrees different than I am. And those are the best people in life. The best people in life are the ones that provide that sandpaper and that friction to help me look at myself instead of look at them. And I do, and I think, well, there's really nothing wrong with the way he does things. It's not hurting anything. He's getting the job done. And for a while there, I was upset with the way he was doing it. What possible benefit is there for me to be upset with him doing that? And there isn't one. And that's the disease model again, because I want things my way, and I get what I want. Now I want more of it, and more of it, and more of it. Well, my kids don't, neither one of them do that. And I have 4 grandkids, and they're age, I think they're 6, 5, 4, and 2. They don't do anything like I want them to. They're just like my kids. Amazing that is, that they're their kids and they're just like mine. And that again is the same thing. That's where I can accept other people and live with them as they are instead of trying to control them, instead of trying to manage things for them, instead of trying to be their higher power. So I made the amends to my ex-wife, made the amends as best I could to my kids. They were very young at the time. And they're 20, I said they're 25 now. And I got to the point where I'd done the amends and I'd finished the 9th step. And all through the time I've been sober, I've heard people say you get sober on the first 9 steps and you maintain your sobriety in steps 10, 11, and 12. Well, I think that works. And I'm sure that works for some people, but it just didn't seem to work for me. What works for me is to carry all 12 steps with me and to do those every day, at least once a day, if not several times a day. Which I'm in a kind of a bizarre thing I was talking to Jim about before the meeting. I'm getting sued by somebody that I think is, let's just say, off a little bit. And I had a good opportunity to go through the steps today several times. I got the letter from the attorney in the mail today. And it's just a bizarre set of circumstances that don't bear any kind of description, but don't warrant anything like that. But it was another good opportunity to go through the steps. I'm powerless over this. I'm powerless over what I want this person to be doing. And if I stay in that and try to be powerful, it's going to make life unmanageable. I'm going to be crazy. And I was able for a while, let it go. It's the 5-minute rule again. I have to do it again if it comes back. I was able to let it go for a while. And to realize that, there's something wrong with the other person, to stop and turn it around and try to look at it from their perspective and what they're trying to see. And I can see what's going on. And there's some drastically unfortunate things with the other individual related to mental health. And I knew that from history, and I still had them paint the house. And so I want to go about this and try to maintain that same attitude, a little bit of compassion for them, instead of wanting to go get them. Because my first want is, let's go get them. And now that I've tried that, let's go get them really good. No, not just really good, let's get them really, really good. Because that's the disease talking again. And as I mentioned, steps 10, 11, and 12, that's a good illustration. I need to start at step 1 and talk about powerlessness and unmanageability. At least talk to myself about it and talk to my sponsor when I can get hold of him. And once I do that, then I get to step 10. And step 10 is something I do, and it's a gateway into the rest of the steps. Something's going wrong, I can pause when agitated or doubtful. And at that point, it says in the big book to that essentially pray for the other person and regard them as a sick person that needs help too. Well, I tried that and it didn't work. What I wind up doing is I go back to step 1 and I'm powerless over alcohol, people, places, and things, and then process through all 12 steps, and that does seem to work. Once I get through with that, in that process of the 12 steps, the really important step, the one that stands out as the premier step of all 12 of them, is step 11. And the part of it that says, I pray for knowledge of His will, knowledge of God's will, and the power to carry it out. And I have to stop for a second and think about the significance of what I'm asking. I'm asking God what He wants me to do, and then I'm asking God, give me the power to do that. I'm not asking Him, God, I want a new car, and I'm asking you for the power to go steal or borrow the money to get that car so I can have what I want. When I ask for knowledge of God's will and the power to carry it out, there's an acid test that goes along with that. If it requires me to get up out of my chair and do something, it's probably God's will. If it lets me sit in my chair and stare off into space, it's probably God's will. So I've got to get up and do something. The whole program is based on action. And the whole, for the folks that are in the room that are Christian, the whole New Testament, when Jesus does something, it says arise and go quickly. It doesn't say take a nap first and do what you want to do and go have a beer and then go after it. It says arise and go quickly. So it's real consistent with that and other religion. I don't mean to promote Christianity. Whatever you happen to be is just fine with me. So when I do that, I get knowledge of God's will. And how does that come about? What does that look like? It looks like an intuitive thought or an idea. And then I'll get an idea of that's the right thing to do. And so if I live like that, and I live based on squaring my conscience up with my behavior, and if what I'm doing is consistent with my conscience, then I'll have a pretty good day. If I were to do something, I was talking to a guy that I sponsored this morning about this thing, and said if I went over and shot all their windows out, that wouldn't improve things. I thought about it. I thought how good that would feel, and I'm not that good a shot, so it would have taken a lot of ammunition to get that done. And I thought about other things that I could do that were hurtful to the other person for just a brief period of time, and realize enough in sobriety that that's really not, first of all, a loving or kind thing to do. It's not consistent with the steps. It's not consistent, as far as I can tell, with God's will. And that's the essence of what step 12 or step 11 does for me. And what I like to say, which may be true, maybe not, at least it seems true to me, and I've never read it anywhere, is that once I've done the first 11 steps, I've done half the program. The other half is carrying the message and practicing the principles. And there's an important phrase in there. It says, tried to carry the message and practice the principles in all my affairs. And tried is an important word because it can have two different connotations in this regard. It can be, well, I tried, so it doesn't work, so I quit. Kind of how I worked the first 15 years of the program. Tried means that I'm going to go out and try to carry the message and try to practice the principles, and I'm guaranteed to fail every day. Then what it means is I have to pick up and try again. The thing about living life and what sobriety actually looks like is it doesn't look like a pink cloud. It looks like work, because it is work, and I have to keep doing it over and over again. And I can stop doing that work and stay sober for a while, but I gradually coast back into a miserable way of life. And I've had practice of doing that the first 25 years I was sober. So it's important to regard that for what it is, and it's work, but it has a huge payoff. And if I do that, if I take that stance, then I have a very good day. Because I'll fail at it. I'll think something, I'll do something, I'll say something, I'll behave in some way that's not right. Stop, go back through the program, do what I can to make amends, and then work on from there. A good example of that today was I had to call this attorney about this funny thing that's come up, this suit, and I left a message for him. And I thought the message stopped. I was driving in my car, leaving him a message. Didn't realize you had to push the pound button at the end. And after I thought I was off the phone with him, or off the phone with his voicemail, I said something like, "Stupid, B-I-T-C-H. I'd like to wring your neck." Well, that's on the tape. Anger's an issue that comes up all the time. I don't discount, I don't hold it against myself to be angry. I'm all alone and nobody can hear it, and that's where I thought I was. I wasn't. So I called him back and left another message and told him that was the wrong thing to do. It's inappropriate for me to do that, and that's not my general way of doing things. And that's really important, because that hints at the failure that I was talking about. I'm going to fail at this all the time. The success is to recognize that's how life is, and then not drink as a result. Because all those things that happened to me when I was drinking were all justifications for why I drank. Well, you would drink too if you were getting sued. You would drink too if you're getting divorced. Or you would drink too if you were getting booted out of a job that you liked, that you worked for a long time. You would drink too if, and then pick out whatever favorite thing I wanted. Always had a justification, and if I didn't, I would make one up. A normal person comes home, they've had a tough day, they sit down and maybe drink a glass of scotch, and relax a little bit and watch some TV, because they had a tough day. An alcoholic will have a perfect day, and they'll come home and sit in the chair and think, well, this could have went better, that could have went better, and this person really didn't smile at me when I walked down the hall, and then I injured my finger on some part I was trying to make, and pretty soon I've got a good justification going for drinking, because if I don't have one, I'll make one up. And that's an important thing to keep in mind, that all that stuff that goes through my head is just justification to justify a character defect. The first one was taking in alcohol and drugs, and the rest of them, everybody's familiar with. I'm still familiar with them. I practice them periodically throughout every day, hopefully for just a minute or so. But there have been days that it's lasted longer. And that's what long-term sobriety looks like, at least for me. And the last thing I'll say is the fruits of sobriety. The fruits of sobriety are the two most important things. And to back this up a bit, one of the things that people always used to say when I first got sober is stay sober until the miracle happens, or stay sober until your wildest dreams come true. Well, my wildest dreams when I first got sober were all self-centered. They all had to do with money and position and power, and I was going to have all this stuff. My wildest dreams have come true, but the dreams are way different now than they were X number of years ago when I was 27 years old. I have two kids. They're both functional in their own ways, and they're both doing very well in their own ways. I love them very much. They had, when I moved up here, I lived in the Dayton area till I graduated high school, and then I moved back up here and bought a house. And until I moved up here, they lived in the Dayton area just a few miles from their mom. First, my daughter and her then husband moved up here, and she now lives a mile away from me with two of my grandkids. They're unfortunately divorced now, and well, I think happily divorced. It turned out it was unbeknown to their mom or I, it was an abusive situation, which we did not realize until well afterwards, and it's a sad thing to live with up close and personal. And she's sober now, so that's a good thing. The other is my son. My son, a year and a half ago, moved from Dayton to within 4 miles from me right now. And so both my kids and all 4 of my grandkids I see every week. Some of them I see more than I want to, but but I still love them and I still like having them around. So that's the fruit of sobriety. And then I have, I'm not wealthy, but I have a little bit of money and I can help them out because it's fact of life in these days. If you're 25 years old and you have 2 kids and you're trying to keep your chin above water, it's hard to do. And if you don't have some support, then it's going to be really tough to do. And I'm grateful that I can be here to provide a little bit of help. It's not as much as they probably need, but it's a little bit of help that helps keep things floating. And that's all I have to say, and I really appreciate you indulging me for 40 minutes or so. So God bless you.
Hey, John. Gary? Thank you, your sponsor.
Yep, we're all signed up.
Yeah. That was a good message.
Amazing.
Yep. When you come here, everything changes. The most important, I changed, you know. That's a long process. It just don't happen overnight. You know, and I've heard you many times, Johnny, you have some good comments. You know, I've always remembered some of the stuff you'd say. You know, it's a process. It's not an event. Yes, I really enjoyed the message. We'll open it up for anybody who wants to say anything.
John, I know you for quite a few years now. I like what you say. I have always liked what you say. You know, and I like that. We were talking about up there, not getting pissed off, not trying to control everything, and letting it just work. I've been working on that. Now we, I have grandkids and all that, and it's real tough with them. You know, but if I can back off, you know, it's not always about me. You know, it's gotta be about them. You know, whenever, something going on, it's about them. You know, I had my time, now let them have their time and grow up. And if it can't be, well, it's my way, we gotta do it my way. However you wanna do it, we'll do it. And however it works out, that's how it'll work out.
Yep.
I gotta remember that. I gotta keep that in my mind at all times when I'm around them. I've known you, like I said, for 24 hours, and I've always gotten something out of what I've talked to you about, no matter what it is or whatever, just like what I heard tonight. I probably heard that a million times, but, till I actually am listening, I won't hear it, and with that, thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. My name's Wes, I'm gonna call it.
Hey, Wes.
Thanks, Dad. Yeah, he triggered a couple things with me. It was a well put together lead. You're very articulate, and I'm jealous, but I stumble over when I'm doing it, and you don't. But you highlighted that in the beginning that part of our journey is to overcome our upbringing. All have to do it. All have to do it. And I said in another meeting the other day that, I'm still involved in that process. My parents were both born in 1925, so they would have been 98, but they only lived in the mid-70s. A long time. Still miss them. But when I get together with my brothers and sisters, particularly my older sister will ask the question, why do you think our dad is such an asshole? And I say, and what do we have to do to forgive him? You also talked about, got to live the steps, action. So that came in my mind the story back. I had to look at my calendar to see when that started. On October 13th, I had a checkup with my primary care physician, which I have to do about 4 times a year. Because I'm diabetic, and she wants to know, well, how are you? Every 90 days you can get a new A1C, and I want it. So, okay. So I go under for my checkup on October 13th. I had an appointment at 8:50 in the morning, and I was a little slow getting up and needed an extra cup of coffee or something. I didn't get there till 9:05. I was 15 minutes late. They canceled my appointment. Said, okay, next time, she's available since she screwed this up, is November 24th. October 13th to November 24th. And that's only because of the cancellation, otherwise it'd be January. Okay, I had it coming. Fine. I had to take my attitude and adjust it. I had to deal with my side of the street. So when I went in today, the first thing I did is I said, I'm here at an 8:50 appointment again. I got there at 8:35 and said, I'm here as you requested 15 minutes ahead of the appointment time. I want you to know, and I'm sorry I missed the last one. And it won't happen again. So I made my amends to the receptionist, I made my amends to the doctor, and when I could finally see her. Because I got into the room at, well, I got there at 8:50. I guess the nurse took my weight and my blood pressure, updated my records for about 10 minutes. Says, the doctor will be here when she gets here, when she finishes up something else. Well, so that would have been about, I don't know, 9:05, 9:10. Came in about 9:50. So it kept me waiting an hour. But I did not complain, because if I'd been late again, I would have messed up at schedule. Somebody else would have had to wait maybe an hour and 10 minutes. It's still my responsibility to be on time and to be responsible for the consequences of my actions and to make my amends promptly. So, thank you for triggering that in me, and I pass.
Thanks, Wes.
My name's Tom Alcoholic.
That's all.
Thanks for coming, John. I knew you were gonna give a good lead, and, I made sure I was here. And I related everything you did right. I'm still sober. Thanks for sharing, thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Rich alcoholic.
Richard.
Thanks, John. I've heard you before. I liked how you talked about the disease model. And to me, it seems like it affects everything, not just alcohol. I want more of everything, not just alcohol, caffeine, nicotine, whatever it is. And I also liked how you talked about this, how you broke down the steps. And I was forewarned that's what you're going to do by somebody. I'll talk to you after. And it was really good. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Steve,
Anybody else?
all around substance abuser, I'd say. It was amazing. It really hit home to me a lot, you know, the importance of the 12 steps. Whether we forget them or don't still work them. I really got a lot from the word there. Got a couple great, listened to a couple real good speeches this week from two men. You was one of them, so I appreciate it.
Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Joni, I'm an alcoholic.
Joni.
You're just one of my favorite people. I could listen to you all day. And I thank you for living these steps that we've been given. Because, yeah, they saved my life. And so I'm going to clear up the 25 and cannot tell a lie, 59. It was close, though. So. Anyways, thanks for being my friend. Thanks for sharing tonight. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you.
Steve Alcoholic.
Steve.
Thanks for your lead. I got a lot out of that. I'm going to pick out one thing out of many things that I picked up from your lead. And that is that every time I walk in these rooms, I click. And I used to have to always worry about that, whether or not I clicked with the people I was running around with. And that was one of the reasons that I used to drink a lot, was it made me feel included. And when I walk into these rooms, I don't feel that. I feel it's just like I belong. So thank you for your lead.
Thanks, Steve.
Anybody else? All right, we'll close the meeting. John, you want to close the meeting with our Father? Congratulations to all the token takers, too.
One day, you know, I'm looking to certify
Wait.
Try something new.
Sweaty hands.
Thank you.
Let's have a moment of silence as the ghosts are popping out that are still suffering. It makes every meeting worthwhile.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power, and glory forever. Amen. You know that, works if you work.
Pick your slips up. You got slips, make sure you take them
Yeah,
out.
they're in the court, in the basket up there.
It's a recorder.